Okay, we'll just keep going with these knowledge questions. Part 2, legal context. So I've got a word bank, so description and part of the system, and so from courts to court reports and things like that. So I think I'll just work through this first one. So the first one, the description used for determining guilt and punishment for a range of issues from civil to criminal, and so that's the court system. So I think might as well just spell this out. So this one is the next one is about being confined. And often release requires a person to have a stable residence on release. The answer was custody, so I don't think it's always the case. People are released without a stable residence on release. Ideally they would, and there are services that do provide it, but yeah, the amount of services out there to meet the demand, I reckon there's a gap. Anyway, they have the ability to move on rough sleepers from public spaces in New South Wales. So that's police powers, and there is a particular piece of legislation. The Sydney Public Reserves Public Safety Bill 2017 provides police with move-on powers to remedy unlawful occupation on Crown land. So that's a piece of New South Wales legislation. So people on public land can be asked to move on under police powers. That probably stemmed from a few years back. So that act came in 2017. So around that time, just prior to that, Martin Place was being turned into a tent city and rough sleepers. So I guess governments were not happy with that look. Anyway, whether that's a solution or just a tidying up approach, I'll let you decide. Okay, the next one is a written record supporting actions taken to rectify a situation or evidence about a situation or series of events in question. So that's a bit wordy. So what that's talking about is court reports, and you'll have a government officer of some description who will make a court report to advise the magistrate what's the best course of action. And certainly in my past, working in that juvenile justice space, that was a role that we took on in writing reports, court reports to the magistrate to inform and say, this is what we believe is the best course of action pertaining to this young person. I know they're on these charges X, Y, and Z, but this is the surrounding circumstances and what we believe the best way forward is. And generally speaking, where possible, we'd be looking at non-custodial sentencing, or if it was custodial, what can benefit happen. And this is in the juvenile system, not the adult system, but what are the things that could be put in place whilst inside that could help that person on the outcome. And that could include education and training, getting a qualification and things like that. All right. The next one, after a criminal charge is laid, a person may be required to live at a specific address or abide by a curfew. Homelessness can result in this legal mechanism being refused. So they're bail conditions. So yeah, they can stipulate where people live and what they do and where they report. And last one, a legal forum for mediation of disputes or judgments about breaches of the Residential Tenancy Act. That's the Tenancy Tribunal. Number 2, to access a service, a person who is homeless or at risk of homelessness must disclose a significant amount of highly sensitive information. What is the legal mechanism for privacy and confidentiality of disclosed information? And what are organisations required to communicate to service users? Okay, this is the sort of stuff we have covered. So it's the collection, storage, use of information is legislated under the National Privacy Act 1988, the first one there. And that last thing is that we communicate as workers. Service users are to be advised how information is used, disclosed and stored, and how to complain if privacy breaches occur. And that's that idea of getting permission to release info, signed permission, usually, at least verbal, talking through things, but certainly signed to release written and personal information is part of our role. Okay, so this next one, looking at that move-on powers, which I just spoke about, that how could the move-on powers of police contribute to exclusion of rough sleeping homeless? So how could the move-on powers of police contribute to exclusion of rough sleeping homeless? So I guess if you can be moved on, what's the role and effect of that? So we talk about the word exclusion. So it reduces the amount of people congregating in one place, for example, a park. Well, it does that, but it's that exclusion. Okay, people may become more disillusioned with the service system and isolated from community or existing support. So it's that one. So it's not just about tidying the place up. It's about what actually is the impact on people. So you're certainly becoming disillusioned if you've got law enforcers just saying you've got to move. It can reduce the amount of visible homelessness impacting in public perception. So that's true as well, and probably certain government representatives might be happy with that. If the place looks tidier, there's less visible homelessness, but that's not the flow-on impact we're looking at on people who are experiencing homelessness. So this next one, by using police powers, this process criminalises homelessness, increasing isolation and stigma. Well, that's it, yeah. If you're becoming criminalised for, sleeping rough in a particular location, that's a flow-on effect that's negative on people that are doing it tough and already, isolated and have a stigma. So that certainly increases all of that. Okay, so what type of housing issues are heard at the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal? True or false? So I've got a little slide here. The New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, ANCAT, helps in resolving tenancy disputes. So if you're a landlord, agent or tenant involved in a dispute, you can apply to have the matter heard at the ANCAT. They refer to rental bonds, rent increases, unpaid rent, termination of a residential tenancy agreement, compensation, repairs, other breaches of the tenancy agreement. So that's from the ANCAT itself. So let's see how we go through. So if rent falls into arrears and a tenant has not entered a payment plan, so that's true. If NBN is not supplied to the property, so internet, that's false. If a tenant has damaged your property, so that could be heard, that's true. Disputes between neighbours where no tenancy breach is evident, so that's nothing to do with NCAT, that's false. If a landlord has failed to provide adequate repairs, is true. If a tenant disputing money taken out of a bond due to regular wear and tear over tenancy, is true. So that takes us to the end of part 2, or onto part 3. So I'm going to call it quits on this one. Toodle pip.